We have a new moon in the sign of Virgo at 1:17 a.m. tonight. I'm recording this on August the 26th around 2:45 p.m. Sorry for the sweatiness. It's really warm in Los Angeles, and I showered a few minutes ago, and typical of Los Angeles, then you burst into a sweat and all that good stuff. So irrespective. Anyway, and the new moon in Virgo ushers us well and truly into, as far as I'm concerned, the second half of this year. Some could say second third of this year. The last third of this year. But which is characterized very much by Mars's entry into Gemini a few days ago, and then Mars going retrograde on October 20th, I believe. Let me get you that information. Yep, October 20th. And then going direct January the 12th, and then taking us to March the 25th. Around the end of March is when Saturn also moves from Aquarius to Pisces. So that kind of March time frame becomes a lot more present. It's almost as if the new year in some ways isn't really going to get going until some of these transits finish up. And let me see if I can actually get you the date for Saturn moving into Pisces, March the 7th, so a little bit earlier than that. Okay. The new moon in and of itself, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't make any transits. But I know some astrologers will disagree and will say that the new moon is square Mars, which, as far as I'm concerned, the sun and the moon square Mars prior to the new moon, which they do, on their way to the moon becoming new. So it is already, the square to Mars is already a separating transit by the time the moon is new. So I consider the square to Mars to be part of the scene setting, or behind the scenes. You know how before a curtain goes up, work goes on behind the scenes, where the furniture needs to be moved around backstage and the set needs to be assembled, and it's part of the preparation for this new moon moment. It's part of what gets us, it's part of the table being laid. The dinner hasn't started yet, but the table is being laid, and part of that dinner or table being laid is the sun and the moon squaring Mars before they meet up and become new. Now, the square to Mars is important, and I'll expand on that. But the new moon allows us an opportunity over the next month, insofar as a month is defined by a lunar cycle, and the time between this new moon in Virgo and the new moon in Libra would be considered a month in the way that I'm talking right now, and that would occur on September the 25th, the new moon in Libra. As we enter into this period with the new moon occurring at 1:17 a.m. Pacific time on the 27th, the sun and the moon will have squared Mars, and indeed the square to Mars will have been developing for about a week or so, 5 days. We'll have felt it since about last week, because the sun will, is going to make its way. The closer the sun and the Mars get to each other, we'll feel that energy building. So we come into this new moon in Virgo, that square being completed and being one of the factors that's going to play into how we deal with the next couple of months. There's two timelines I'm looking at with this new moon. One timeline continues some of the year's themes into March of 2023. Another timeline takes us into October, and well into October, partly because Mercury, which is now in Libra at the time of the new moon, is going to go retrograde on September the 10th. At least for a few days, at the very least till the end of August, if not even for the first few days of September. As far as I'm concerned, Mercury is direct and is moving. We're in its shadow period, and I'll talk about that shadow period again. The shadow periods I think the shadow period is quite important in relationship to this new moon, even though we're talking about the Mercury retrograde. I'll explain. Stay with me, please, if you don't mind. Mercury goes retrograde September the 10th, goes direct October the 2nd, and then re-enters Libra. So it's in Libra. It's going to go retrograde on September the 10th. It's going to come into Virgo September the 23rd. It's going to go direct on October the 2nd, and it's going to come back into Libra October the 10th. And then it's not going to move into Scorpio till October the 29th. So for a lot of October, some of the things that we're dealing with are going to find that kind of resolution or finally things starting to move forward by the time we head into October. Okay, so there's these two timelines we're starting to look at. One, we would much rather it be shorter than that, but takes us into October, stretches into October, and another, as we look towards the end of this year, it kind of puts the end of this year, astrologically speaking, into March of 2023. The new moon on the way to becoming new squares Mars. The other important set of transits at this time are Venus opposing Saturn, Venus and Leo opposing Saturn in Aquarius. And as Venus has headed to this opposition, it squared Uranus in the North Node in Taurus. And Venus opposing Saturn and Saturn squaring Uranus are two of the three non-new moon related transits that are encoded into this month. So the new moon comes into being on the heels of a certain amount of tension that we may well have been feeling for the past week or so, week and a half or so. It's not, you can feel the pull of certain planets that are trying to do their work to pull us out into the future, like Jupiter, which is now retrograde, but it's still, trying to finish up the work to create auspicious new beginnings in the Pisces part of the chart in November, December of this year. And it's retrograde now in Aries, but it's going to come back into Aries then between January and May of next year. And then come into Taurus, where the eclipses are happening right now after May of next year. So there are things that continue to pull us forward, but as we head between now and March of 2023, the astrology at least actively supports tying up loose ends, which has been such a constant theme for the past few years, with especially last year in 2021, Saturn squaring Uranus. This year in 2022, Saturn and Uranus come incredibly close to squaring each other for the fourth time, but don't. But right now, it's still an approaching transit. So, on its way to becoming new, the Sun and the Moon square Mars in Gemini. Sun and Moon in Virgo square Mars in Gemini. The two transits that are encoded into this new moon are Venus opposing Saturn, and both planets, but especially Saturn squaring Uranus in Taurus. I'll talk about the third transit in a second. So there's a lot of dependence. And for me, Venus and Leo is extremely important right now. The new moon occurs in Virgo. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in Libra, ruled by Venus. Venus is in Leo, ruled by the Sun. The Sun is in Virgo. So between Mercury, Venus, and the Sun, these are the three dispositors of the chart. The Sun contributing to making the moon new within 24 hours. Mercury in Libra, getting ready to go retrograde on September the 10th, but in Libra right now, and Venus and Leo opposing Saturn. And the Venus-Saturn opposition to me is the most important transit in this lunar cycle because there's something about lessons that Saturn is trying to teach us in Aquarius. So pay attention to where Aquarius is in your chart, what house it occupies, and what that house stands for. Lessons that Saturn has been trying to teach us and incorporate for us in the sign of Aquarius. And Saturn presenting our sense of self-worth and how we value ourselves, Venus, and what we value, and how that value translates into abundance and strong relationships. It's as if Saturn is giving our Venus a test. And how we fare with that test may well determine how smoothly the next month or 2 months go, or how challenged we are by it. So our ability to manifest worth and value, our own sense of self-respect, our own sense of self-worth, more importantly, and what we value and what values we want to espouse, get tested by Saturn in the opposing sign of Aquarius, of Venus and Leo, Saturn and Aquarius. Saturn, having been in Aquarius for a couple of years and preparing to leave by March, currently retrograde, so trying to incorporate some lessons. And Saturn saying, all right, well, Venus, you sound like you're ready to go. What have we learned in terms of our set of values? And it could very well be that if you make decisions related to the Aquarius part of your chart and revert back to behaviors and patterns that Saturn has been trying to get you out of, that might make the next couple of months challenging. You may have to deal with the consequences of that. And Saturn may present those lessons in Saturnian ways: restriction, difficulty, challenge, not being able to manifest your full potential to its fullest, affecting to some extent perhaps your income and your relationships. If you do incorporate those lessons, then in a kind of Saturnian way, you might walk a little bit of a cold, hard walk, because sometimes it's like a carrot being dangled in front of you and you kind of making those choices. But, it may be that by incorporating those lessons, you play the Saturnian slow and steady game and continue to build whatever it is that Saturn is trying to build for you in the Aquarius part of your chart through March. Added to that, Venus squaring Uranus, and there's a real need as you come into this new moon to pay attention to how you are treating yourself and your sense of values and your sense of self-worth. And you might be tested in that. And some of these tests might be, because the new moon is in Virgo, related to your meticulousness, related to your ability to communicate, to attend to details, to write, to speak, to organize, to execute, to the execution of tasks, the organization of your day-to-day life, and the execution of your responsibilities to others and yourself, whether it is how you serve yourself, how you serve others, finding the sacred in the mundane, in the execution of tasks, sort of in a very kind of Bhagavad Gita concept in terms of you take care of excellent execution and spirit will take care of the results. And don't get attached to the results, because just do what is in front of you and do it to the best of your ability with a sense of service and completion and excellence. Very Virgoic feeling. And the good news is that the new moon in Virgo is still coming up within 24 hours. So you can approach the month with that spirit. And if you have been tested recently and continue to be tested with regard to what you value, how you value yourself, your sense of self-worth, you're operating by your sense, an appropriate sense of code and values, and trusting spirit with certain mystical principles that are hard to, not compromising on your values in certain ways that feel like, well, this could be a good short-term solution, but in the longer, how we can be led astray by what some people may call low-hanging fruit, or not even fruit, the promise of it or the talk of it, or feeling like, oh, I'm going to miss out on something, so let me just compromise what I would normally do here, what I would hold myself to in order to take advantage of this. But sometimes when we compromise ourselves, and particularly right now, if we compromise ourselves related to old behaviors and patterns in the Aquarius part of our chart, that's where you need to look out for this. That's where you need to look out for this. And if you hold yourself to your values and what you value and a sense of excellence and execution, the next month or two might be easier. Otherwise, you may need to deal with the lessons, and you may already intuitively know whether you are saying yes to something you really should say no to, or no to something you really should say yes to. Probably more likely yes to something you should probably say no to. That's more Saturnian with a Venus opposition to Saturn. Then just be prepared as you head over the next couple of months to do the work to clean things up and to stay vigilant so that you don't deal with the consequences of making a weaker decision. Now, the third transit has Mercury in Libra trining Mars in Gemini. But this trine doesn't really happen. It actually happens for good on October the 22nd of this year, after Mercury goes direct and Mars makes its way more into Gemini, and Mercury is making its way more into Libra. Mars goes retrograde, and these two planets actually finally trine at that point in time. But again, there's this sense, as we've headed this new moon, of the table or the stage being set in some way for us to start contending with what we need to contend with and the transformation we need to create for ourselves as we look ahead to March 2023. So that feeling of imminence would be right. I also want to, Mercury's shadow period, Mercury entered the same degrees where it's going to be retrograde on August the 22nd, okay? And the other thing I want to mention is Mercury also entered Virgo on August the 4th. Now, between August the 4th and maybe for another few days, the Virgo part of your chart may have felt really bountiful and positive, because Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, was moving quickly through Virgo with not much opposition other than the opposition to Neptune. Not much chaos, and actually trining the North Node and Uranus. Now, on its way there, it could be that in the last week, as the Sun opposed Saturn, and then is opposing Mars before the new moon, as Venus is opposing Saturn as we speak, and as the moon gets ready to square Mars before it becomes new, it could be that the last week and a half have introduced ripples of tension and maybe a slight conflict between the Virgo part of your chart and the Gemini part of your chart, where Mars is, where the square is occurring. I just want you to pay attention to what all of that is, because as we move into this next month, and then when Mercury goes retrograde and retrogrades back into the Virgo part of your chart, then goes direct, a lot of these themes are going to come back. It's almost like the stage is set for the drama to begin. And with this new moon, the curtains open. And there are multiple acts. You know, there's an act that takes us to about, let's just say October the 20th, when Mars goes retrograde. Let's just make the 3 acts the Mars retrograde acts. Then there's an act while Mars is retrograde till January the 12th. Then there's a final act that takes us to the end of March. Let's just kind of roughly, but the first act needs to set up the conflicts. The first act needs to, that's when the drama needs to unfold. And it may be that the square to Mars and these tests that we have been given, that we're coming into this new moon with, are the scenery setting or the background or the backstory. And with this new moon at about 1:17 a.m. Pacific time on August the 27th is when the curtains will open and we will get going. Well, what's the best way to deal with the moon's energies? While Mercury is retrograde, the same part, the Virgo part of your chart that showed so much abundance and forward movement, might show signs of tension. But by that time, what is so interesting is that by September the 5th, Venus comes into Virgo. Not the happiest placement for Venus, but at the same time, it is Venus. There is the potential for opportunity. So even the Mercury retrograde, the thing to watch out for is that opportunities may come, but these decisions with Venus opposing Saturn that we have just been heading into this new moon with might start to come home to roost if we have not valued ourselves appropriately. And so, you know, that's what creates the house cleaning, the dust bunnies that we have to deal with. And we may find there's going to be opportunity for forward movement and opportunities will come in, but there is a certain amount of cleanup that we're going to have to do. And we're certainly being tested with regard to the lessons that Saturn has been trying to teach us as we enter into this new moon. And, you know, the next 6 months or so, as I said, if you want to go into the future, tests are really, you know, what have we learned over the past 2 or 3 years? And really putting those in practice and really incorporating those. And unfortunately, with certain planets, particularly Saturn, the way those lessons are taught are through repeated tests and patterns. And we may intuitively know, as we say, which way to go, but we may become tempted to go for, you know, will be tested. And so how you approach that may mean that the next couple of months is colored by that. How to approach it if you are compromising on your values as you head into this new moon, just be ready to clean it up. Just be ready to remain extra vigilant to make sure that those things that you think could be potential pitfalls with whatever decisions you're making, I have made over the past week and a half, if they start to arise in a way that you don't, that you're ready to act to clean them up and sort them out. The buck stops with you. So even if you have been tested and even if you quote unquote don't quite make the grade headed to this new moon, you can still get in there and twist and get the sailboat in order so it can continue to stay afloat. It will take effort and you will have to acknowledge the lesson and say, thank you, Saturn, got it, understood. I see the consequence, Saturnian, action consequence, and I learned the lesson. And I take it upon and we move forward. There is an opportunity in the Virgo part of your chart over the next month, and opportunities will come in. Mercury will be retrograde, and things will go a little bit up and down and will need to be sorted out. And whatever dramas have emerged over the past 10 days, you'll see they will continue to be part of the theme, part of the play that's going to start in the first act of which will take us to about October 20th. Okay, I'm going to leave it at this. There'll always be more to come. Let's see how the next couple of weeks, next month or so rolls out. When by the time in a couple of weeks we get to the Pisces full moon, that's the day when Mercury goes retrograde. So that in and of itself is going to be a fascinating video and fascinating stuff to look at. So happy new moon and onward. If you found the video useful, feel free to share it, like it, comment on it on YouTube. It increases traffic, I think, to the video. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button, and that especially the wiggly thing on top to be notified whenever I do new videos. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.